Hello everyone, my name is Eddie Carmona and I am passionate about effective advocacy. Today, I would like to talk to you about advocacy methods I have found helpful throughout my career. Advocacy is complex, but people work on a pre-established set of cognitive functions that we can tap into to give our message the best chance at influence. When engaging with rhetoric, that means when we try to persuade an audience who is anyone who may be listening, they are the most important variable to keep in mind. The audience should influence the speaker's words, the emotions conveyed, and the call to action. So a speaker may utilize pathos to influence the audience's feelings and beliefs on a topic. Their tone and language choices differ when addressing adults versus children. Ultimately, the audience is who the speech intends to reach, persuade, inform, or entertain. Public speakers need to keep in mind their audience. They need to play to their interests and expectations. The audience offers cues to guide the course of the speech through their verbal and nonverbal interactions as well. Next to the audience, when advocating for a cause that we care about, it is essential to recognize the power of our words in shaping society. To begin, let's consider the significance of patterns in messaging. Understanding the use of patterns is essential in crafting a resonant message for your intended audience. It can be as straightforward as following a simple sentence. It's as easy as 1, 2, 3. When trying to deliver a message and trying to be persuasive, you might want to consider the rule of 3. Human psychology is pre-constructed on the ability to detect patterns. It is for this reason that we must establish patterns to identify with our audience. 3 is the shortest quantity from which a pattern may be detected. Consider using the rule of 3 when engaging with your audience. Next, we will talk about contrast. Finally, we will talk about the use of word puzzles to engage our audience with our message. First, we will begin with the rule of 3. The rule of 3 is a rhetorical device that uses 3 events, characters, objects, or 3 words, phrases, sentences, to make things more memorable. It was introduced by Aristotle with his ethos, logos, and pathos concepts. Below, we see an example of each. Martin Luther King uses ethos in his speech by discussing historical reference. By referring to 100 years later, King is drawing attention to the historical context and the promises that were made a century ago, likely alluding to the Emancipation Proclamation of 1863, which gives historical reference and weight to his arguments and demonstrates his understanding of the timeline and the promises that have not been fulfilled.
But 100 years later, the Negro still is not free. 100 years later, the life of the Negro is still sadly crippled by the manacles of segregation and the chains of discrimination.
Next, we will see Winston Churchill's patriotic and nationalistic appeal, where he will use phrases like defend it to the death, their native soil, and we shall defend our island, to evoke a strong sense of patriotism and love for one's homeland. This appeal is likely to stir emotions amongst the audience to feel a deep connection with their nation.
We shall fight in France. We shall fight on the seas and oceans. We shall fight with growing confidence and growing strength in the air. We shall defend our island, whatever the cost may be. We shall fight on the beaches. We shall fight on the landing grounds. We shall fight in the fields and in the streets. We shall fight in the hills. We shall never surrender.
Finally, we will see President Obama's speech, which will demonstrate the use of cause and effect relationship. This passage outlines a case and effect relationship to explain the consequences of not taking action in the Middle East. It argues that if the international community fails to act against the use of chemical weapons by the Assad regime, it could lead to a series of negative outcomes.
If we fail to act, the Assad regime will see no reason to stop using chemical weapons. As the ban
In ancient Rome, one time Cicero was so excited about his argument that he was going to make in court, and he said to his teacher Solon of Rhodes, he said, I have all these proofs. My arguments are bulletproof. There's no way we can lose this trial. To this, his teacher replied that the most important thing in rhetoric was not the arguments, but delivery, delivery, delivery. So we try to deliver our content in pairs of 3s. This can take form in the list of 3. For example, a list of the same 3 words. It can take the form of the national motto of France and the Republic of Haiti, which is an example of the tripartite motto using 3 different words, liberté, égalité, and fraternité, or a list of 3 phrases like of the people, by the people, for the people, who was said by Abraham Lincoln in the Gettysburg Address. The human inclination to compare and contrast is the basis for paired sequences which link neutral pairings that audiences can understand. One version is cause and effect, where one main point is the cause and the other main point is the effect. Others are as follows. There are pros and cons, opposites, comparisons, and phrase reversals. Let's start out with pros and cons. Pros and cons demonstrates fair analysis, building your credibility. Present the cons first to give them their due, but follow up with more robust pros. Use clear organizational cues like first and on the other hand to help the audience follow. Lean into the pros, spending more time making those arguments to influence your audience. Prioritize 1 or 2 compelling pros over covering extensive cons. Thoughtfully considering counter-arguments make your case appear more objective and reasoned. Opposites contrast immediately and grab the audience attention. When you present opposing ideas or concepts, it creates a mental shift for your listeners, prompting them to pay closer attention to you and understanding the differences you are highlighting. Here are some examples. The best means of ensuring peace is preparing for war, which was said by Alexander Hamilton, and now is the time to rise from the dark, desolate valley of segregation to the sunlit path of racial justice, which was said by Martin Luther King Jr., and it is a stark difference in the wording that he uses. Next, we have comparisons. By utilizing comparisons in public speaking, we can enhance the clarity of our argument by juxtaposing contrasting ideas and making complex concepts more accessible to the audience. Secondly, comparisons evoke emotions, making your message more memorable and relatable. Third, they provide vivid imagery, creating mental images that reinforce your points. To use comparisons effectively, focus on relevance to your audience. Employ diverse forms like analogies and metaphors, and ensure clarity in the parallel structure. For instance, John Major's quote cleverly contrasts the vastness of written content with the insignificance of the subject, creating a memorable and impactful comparison. A great deal has been written about my education, never has so much been written about so little. Phrase reversals, or the use of an antithesis, can be a powerful rhetorical device in speeches. They involve the juxtaposition of contrasting ideas with a parallel grammatic structure. You can use these like John F. Kennedy did in emphasizing a call to action. Ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. The original was, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. Reversed, ask not what you can do for your country, ask what your country can do for you. Purpose. By reversing the phrasing, you can emphasize the call to action differently. The reversal invites the audience to reflect on their responsibilities before considering what to expect from their country, highlighting control and power dynamics. Finally, how do we get people thinking? You ask a question, of course. Rhetorical questions can be a powerful tool in advocacy by engaging your audience and encouraging critical thinking. There are 2 types of rhetorical questions. Hypopora is a figure of speech where the speaker answers a question they have posed immediately. It is commonly used in persuasive speeches to showcase knowledge and decisiveness. Rhetorical questions, on the other hand, are not meant to be answered explicitly but linger in the air to create a dramatic effect. For example, did we simply tear down the barriers to freedom and then stand idly as the economic slavery was erected in the freedom's place? Which was said by Coraletta Scott King. There is also aporia. Aporia expresses doubts and can be a sincere or rhetorical question, depending on the intention behind it. A sincere aporia seeks a genuine answer, while a rhetorical aporia implies an answer, like to be or not to be. That is the question.